You're watching Bread and Roses, a weekly political social magazine that's broadcast via New Channel TV in English and Persian. Hi everyone, I'm Maryam Namazie.
And I'm Fariborz Pooya. In this week's program, we'll be discussing blasphemy law. We'll interview Bob Churchill of International Humanist and Ethical Union on this issue.
In Shocking News of the Week, we'll be discussing the attack on a museum in Tunisia, as well as the attack in Tunisia against women LGBT. In the Insane Fatwa of the Week, this time it's from Indonesia, and a fatwa to murder gay and lesbian people there.
Good news of the week, it's from Afghanistan, where people from there started a campaign, Justice for Farkhunda, a young woman who was killed and burned to death by the Islamists.
Stay with us. Blasphemy laws give respectability to violence against people and women. Islamists and the religious right in particular have placed a false moral equivalency between hurt sensibilities and human lives where none exist. The world would be a much better place without blasphemy laws. When we're discussing the issue of blasphemy laws, it's interesting how there is this false moral equivalency. You have someone burning a Quran, you have someone who writes a book about Islam, and immediately we're told that they've offended some sensibilities, and therefore it gives the impression that their attack was justified because it's as if, you being hurt is the same as you going and killing somebody. Yeah. And the reality is these are not one and the same. If you're offended, shut the book, turn away, go somewhere else. You cannot kill, hurt, imprison, maim people because of it.
The interesting point about blasphemy law is a continuous issue. Eating food at certain times, laughing, wearing bright colour sort of clothes. There's so minute, even minutest details, it seems that offends certain people, and they use that to control people. So there's two aspects to this. One is actually means of control of society. The other thing is that about people stopping people questioning anything, and I think that's the crux for me. That's why when we are facing blasphemy law, you could immediately see they're trying to control people and shut down any criticism and critical thinking.
In a sense, it's exactly the case where you have the Islamic scholar who's an Islamist, Qaradawi. He had said something about how if you allow people to leave Islam, for example, become apostates, if you allow them to blaspheme, you're not going to have Islam, any more religion left. And that's the point. They're trying to stop people from questioning, from criticizing. And the way they do that is because you can't stop people's free thinking and their questioning, using the most violent means in order to try to shut down this sort of discussion and debate.
So what do we need to do about this? I think that's the key issue.
Yeah, I think we've got to work towards ending blasphemy laws everywhere and anywhere. And the fact of the matter is we've got to stop excusing, their justifications for their violence. Very often when you look at the sort of response to an attack on Charlie or Avijat Roy in Bangladesh or the woman Farkhunda in Afghanistan, the response, even from people who are considered progressive, is, well, she knew she was going to offend. Why did she do it? And, it's like saying that the woman who got raped deserved to be raped. If only she hadn't worn such a short skirt. If only she hadn't been out so late. It's blaming the victim, and that has to stop if we're going to get anywhere.
And I think there's an element of tolerance, and people, and particularly religious people, learning the issue of tolerance. They need to be tolerant of people being critical of the views and the philosophy or the way of life they want to impose. So this is quite important, linked with tolerance and providing a space for people to be free thinking and being able to criticize everything. There's no limits, everything, and I think that's quite important. So there's a link between blasphemy law and shutting down critical thinking, and also I think there's an element of tolerance as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think blasphemy is a dirty word in a sense if someone's accused of causing blasphemy. But I think it was Ina Shevchenko from Femen who had recently said that we need to celebrate blasphemy because it is an important challenge to religion and to the gatekeepers of power that are telling us what we can and cannot say. So until they kill and hurt people for blasphemy, we must celebrate blasphemy and shout it from every rooftop. Bob Churchill, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to ask you about the campaign to end blasphemy laws. Why is that important?
Well, it's important, I think, especially at the moment, because we've seen such a period of sort of tragedy in the last few months after Paris and Copenhagen, but also because we've seen a really bad reaction to that. And I think part of the reason that we brought forward plans to have this sort of global campaign called End Blasphemy Laws, run by an international coalition of groups that have all been campaigning on blasphemy laws for a long time. But part of the reason that we brought forward the plans to have this campaign wasn't just because of the events that we saw in Paris and Copenhagen, but because of the reaction to them. That so much of the sort of media and comment afterwards was either borderline apologist for the terrorists, or mollycoddled and made excuses for limitations on freedom of expression. So I think that was in a sense that's almost as alarming as the terror attacks themselves.
I mean, how does this help? In a sense, do you think these sort of excuses and justifications help to keep blasphemy laws in place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that whenever you've got a law in place and someone's trying to bring it down, if there is someone excusing and apologising for it, or as we see a lot, I mean, part of the reason that this is so international and that we're trying to look at blasphemy laws and laws against insult to religion and so on as one legal issue is because we've seen that laws in one place will be used as a sort of rationalisation to keep laws in another place, that when people like the Pope say, you know, it's excusable to hit someone if they insult your deeply held beliefs, if they insult your mother and so on, or if you have people say, oh yes, it's terrible, but I didn't like some of the cartoons, or I didn't like this, I didn't like that, then of course that lends a sort of false legitimacy to people who say it's necessary or we have the right to curtail free expression on religion or on any other issue that I hold personally very dear. So it is about trying to break down the sort of weird mutual dependency that exists internationally that sort of supports these laws. And I think what's really sort of sad about it is that so many of the sort of commenting class and so many people did sort of hedge their bets on whether it was good or bad that Charlie Hebdo was attacked, and yet the sort of broader human rights international consensus, again something that our campaign is trying to convey, is now quite solidly against the existence of blasphemy laws, and I think that's something that, because there's been so much equivocation, people have sort of lost sight of a bit. Actually, the EU, through the EU Guidelines on Freedom of Religion or Belief, the United Nations Human Rights Council, when it's doing its job properly, the UN in general, at the General Assembly, have all moved away from the idea that there's any legitimacy to defamation of religion laws or blasphemy laws, and the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief is very, very clear. There should be no blasphemy laws, they should be ended. The EU says you have the right to ridicule belief. It's very good, it's very clear. It says if you, the idea that if you speak and someone may react violently to that, there is a very clear distinction between that and incitement to violence. They are different things. So the actual international human rights consensus is fairly solid, and that's part of what our International Coalition Against Blasphemy Laws is trying to show and convey, that there is this worldwide agreement amongst human rights NGOs and human rights experts that we need the right to blaspheme, we need the right to criticise religion, and that it already is there, it already exists and can be supported by existing treaties and the existing international human rights framework.
Why do we still have so many blasphemy laws?
I think it's a number of reasons, but they're obviously very often interlinked with and used the most when there is a sort of regime that uses them to prosecute people who in addition to talking about religion in some way are also talking about a political regime. So for example, Raif Badawi, there is a very sort of clear correlation that he is targeted partly because he's saying there should be more freedom of religion, freedom of belief. but also he was specifically talking about and criticising the interaction between state and mosque, between the religious authorities. And I think very often we see that when there are freedom of religion or belief violations or freedom of expression violations against non-religious persons, secular persons, or people criticising religion, they have often also made some sort of political gesture or statement. So partly they're kept in place because they're a useful tool of power, but we also see this other side of things where they actually become nothing but a trouble really to the authorities. So in Pakistan, I would say the story is a bit different. They're probably many in the political class will now recognise that these laws are a liability. They're causing problems. They bring negative attention internationally. They create mob violence, difficult situations for the police, and so on. I'm quite convinced that there will be many in the political class in Pakistan that would, if they could, get rid of them. But they're unable to say that. They're unable to even breach the topic because the people that have done that, like Salman Taseer, get killed. The judge that sentenced Mumtaz Qadri, the assassin of Salman Taseer originally, had to flee the country. So we're talking about people having to go into exile, risking their lives, potentially getting murdered. So yeah, it's this twin thing that in some countries it's a tool of the political establishment. In other countries, it's that there is so much highly violent threat behind the supporters of blasphemy laws, who are doing it just purely because they think that there should be blasphemy laws and there shouldn't be blasphemy and so on, that it's impossible to actually bring them down and change them and reform them.
How prevalent are blasphemy laws?
Very. So we, the End Blasphemy Laws campaign, which is being run by a coalition of international and national groups, has sort of taken a lot of its data from the IHEU Freedom of Thought report, so I'm the editor of the IHEU Freedom of Thought report. I work at the International Humanist and Ethical Union, and we found that there are about 70 countries in the world, and actually we've got a few more to add in where there were kind of cases that we didn't quite consider, or laws that weren't included in the report but are important for the blasphemy laws. And yeah, there are about 70 countries that have some form of blasphemy law. And I think it's very important to note that the number differs depending on who you ask. And we've tried to be inclusive of any law that can be or is used to prevent criticism, satire, or ridicule of religion. So we include laws against insult to religion or insult to religious sensibilities and so on. We do not include incitement to hatred or incitement to violence laws, unless, as in some cases, they are used to suppress criticism of religion as well.
A final question is why is there a need to end blasphemy laws?
Well, the victims of blasphemy laws are the people who are accused of blasphemy. We've seen it time and time again. It's people like Farkhunda last week in Afghanistan, murdered in the streets for no reason. One of these spurious, malicious accusations of burning the Quran, which is never verified, just a way of attacking someone. Often women, often vulnerable people, when a crowd of men decide they want to get violent. So people like that are victimised, picked off individually, or because they're part of a minority, because they're Baha'i or Ahmadi or Christian and so on. But also because they're linked to this political suppression as well. So very often the people who are pinned down by blasphemy and insult to religion laws are people like Raif Badawi, but also his lawyer Walid Abu Alker, where there's someone who's standing up for human rights and someone who's saying that we should be free to talk about religion and to have whatever religion or belief we want. So the people who are being pinned down are the people who bring the prospect of change, not just on freedom of expression issues, but on wider issues as well. So ending blasphemy laws is about protecting innocent victims and enabling people to speak about human rights, about secularism, about their democracy in a wider context as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
hope you enjoyed that interview. It's an important campaign to defend, to end blasphemy laws everywhere. I think it will make the world a much safer place for people.
And I think that's part and parcel of progressive secularists and atheists actually being on an offensive now. It's our time to say, look, end blasphemy law. Blasphemy laws are reactionary, they are inhumane, they are trying to stop free thinking, and it's important for people. I think we've said this many times on this program, for people to survive their daily life. You know, we need to be able to criticize, we need to be able to question, and that's very closely linked to blasphemy. So blasphemy laws that prevent any criticism must end, and must be, you know, everywhere. There shouldn't be any country or anywhere that criticism of religion or, you know, any sacred text or idea are non-go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things too is that it's also something that affects a lot of people who are religious. You have people who are, let's say, Christian minorities in Pakistan who are facing blasphemy charges, and Muslims who've questioned or said things differently than the
different versions of Islam.
Giving different versions,
yeah,
like Baha'is are considered heretics, the Ahmadiyas are considered heretics. And, you know, whether they're religious minorities or whether there are Muslims who think differently.
And I think this is very much linked to where there are movements to improve a lot. We've seen, for example, in Iran, a lot of the trade unionists been arrested, and part of the charges is blasphemy and criticizing the sacred structure within the existing society. It's very much linked to a protest movement and social movements that exist.
When we are talking about the issue of blasphemy, yes, definitely we have to end blasphemy laws everywhere, but I think it's also really important to see blasphemy laws within a larger context of the role of religion in the state and public space. And it's something that it's not enough just to be opposed to blasphemy laws or apostasy laws. We have to be opposed to Sharia laws, to any manifestation of religion in the state and in power, which is used to manipulate, to control, to restrict and deny people their rights and freedoms. Shocking news of the week is from Tunisia. We've all heard reports of the horrendous attack on a museum there. There's also been reports of Islamist attacks against LGBT women. And again, it's what, you know, the Islamists versus just ordinary people going about their lives, trying to live as they want. They just will never allow it, and it's important to stand up to them.
And I think the important thing is that Tunisia, it's an important country. There is a huge fight between the secularists and progressive people of Tunisia and the Islamists. And what do? They're picking on a section of the society that they think they can win. And that's why they've attacked homosexuals now, and they've killed them because they think they have an element of support within the wider society. That's why it is important that we need to condemn this and support the secularists and progressive people in Tunisia who are fighting the Islamists, and there's a strong movement there.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think this is the point exactly, is that because there is a fight back that exists, very often you do see this sort of violence as a way of pushing that back and scaring people, intimidating them, terrorizing them. And if you look at the LGBT women who were attacked, you've got an organization called Shuf who has said that they're denied the ability to live in security in public and private spaces without danger. They're facing violence every day that goes unpunished. And it says, we are refused the right to be ourselves, we are denied the right to be women, we are women, and as women we will never cease to claim our right to exist by and for ourselves. And I think, again, you see always this clash between, this amazing humanity versus really the barbarity of our times. The insane fatwa of this week is from the highest body of ulama in Indonesia, and they have said that homosexuality should be punished by death. And it is this obsession with, sexuality, people's bodies. Again, anything that is normal, natural, loving, happy, they're against it.
And these horrible people always pick on the section of society that they think they can win. They, from their point of view, the weakest sort of group, so they could organize the rest of the society against them. But as you said, they're just crazy about sex. These guys. It's not that because they celebrate it or think it's something natural. That's the way they control it. So, I mean, that's what they do everywhere. And in Indonesia, this is what they've done. I think
it reminds me of that joke of that comedian who said, the suicide bombers are not really, they don't really have bombs on them. They're just exploding out of sexual frustration because they're just so obsessed with sex. And, they hate it so much, in a sense, that they want to kill or abuse anyone who wants to just live, normally and have sex, which is a very good and positive thing, actually.
Yeah,
but one of the things that the Fatwa has said, the head of the Fatwa Commission, get another job, get a decent job, He's basically said that it's a disease that needs to be cured, and to cure this disease, you need a series of brutal penalties ranging from caning to death.
And I think this is shared with the Catholic Church. I think that's in Africa we'll see that. Many countries in Africa, and the sources of it should be in. I think it comes from Vatican as well, and you'll see many Christian groups have the same idea about homosexuality.
And he said that this is forbidden in Islam because it's a vile act that has to be punishable by the death penalty. And he says it doesn't matter that they love each other.
And they keep punishing people for various things, and most of the punishment are by death.
Yeah, they love death.
Yes.
Like we've said many times on this program, Islam, like all religions, is a religion of death. They just want to kill, but challenging that are you've got gay rights groups in Indonesia saying we have a right to be gay and pushing back and fighting back in Tunisia and other places. And this is our movement, people who are fighting back and defending, the very basic right to be gay, to be straight, to be whatever you want to be without the state's intervention, and especially the ulamas and the Fatwa Commission's intervention.
The good news of this week is the huge campaign internationally launched for justice for Farkhunda, a young woman who was burned to death in Kabul in Afghanistan. And this is, although the whole news and the background to this is shocking, painful, but at the same time out of that, a very progressive, very just movement actually, which is focused on the right of women, is emerging in Afghanistan, and it's important that everybody recognizes this, that it's one of those moments that could affect Afghan society positively and bring international support for right of women and critical thinking in Afghanistan, which is very closely linked to the debate we've had today regarding blasphemy.
And I think one of the things too is that if you look at the aftermath of this heinous crime, you have Farkhunda being given a burial with real respect. You have women. We're going to show photos of this because I think these photos are so beautiful, carrying her coffin to give her a burial, and you can see, the sort of humanity that has come out in response to this really brutal act. And you've got this campaign where thousands of people in Afghanistan and elsewhere are saying that we are Farkhunda, we demand justice, particularly when you think that the police were standing by while this was happening. And you've got clerics saying, it was right what had happened to her.
And the cleric actually said that wanted to come to her burial, he was kicked out.
Good.
And that's good news, and everybody's attacking that. The other thing is that everybody's demanding, and has been demanding, that there is international condemnation of this. The board has a responsibility towards Afghanistan, and I think it's important to support this progressive element. We've seen that international sort of community, so-called international community, it poured millions of dollars and pounds in support of a coalition government between Taliban and various factions of the ruling class in Afghanistan. What we haven't seen is the support for the progressive section.
And that's something that only we can organise and give people everywhere.
And I think progressive movement internationally, they need to support this. And this is a it could be a brilliant moment in the history of Afghanistan, I think.
Unfortunately, it's at the loss of a young woman's life. But in a sense, when we look at things that have changed, that have been the sort of spark for real fundamental changes sometimes in society, it's often been these sorts of cases, and this could really herald a change in Afghanistan, one which gives the women's rights campaigners, the secularists, the progressive movement in that country a real upper hand for a change. And I think it's definitely something we need to support. We need to demand justice and accountability, but also I think we need to be strongly against the execution of the perpetrators.
Some people have asked for capital punishment of those arrested, and I think we need to be very clear that that's not, human society shouldn't have capital punishment. It needs to be these people should be on trial, needs to be investigated. The role of the religious organizations, the role of the police who stood by and did nothing, and that needs to be investigated and brought to account properly. But no capital punishment. I think that's one of the strong messages from this program. We hope that you've enjoyed this week's program on blasphemy law and the interview we've had. And please do write to us. We welcome your comments and support for this program, and that's where
we've also got a fundraising campaign on Patreon. We've got 12 lovely funders, and we're looking for more people who can fund us on a weekly basis with just $1 a week. That's nothing. And it really will help us be able to develop our program and get some better equipment, which Reza Moradi is deeply in need of.
And I think we should also remind our viewers that because of the travelling that you have, we are
not yet.
No.
We'll tell you next week. Pretend you didn't hear that.
Okay, you're right. Okay, let's not.
We hope you enjoyed this week's program, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.